Good evening. My name is Maria Moreno. I'm a member of the Chicago Teachers Union. Okay. First of all, I want to thank the British Columbia Teachers Federation for hosting the 12th Tri-National Conference. I was unable to attend the one in Chicago, and so I'm very excited to be here. This is my first one. But I also would like to thank the founding teachers from the US, Canada, and Mexico who started the Tri-National Coalition back in 1993. I mean, from the deepest of my heart, this is the, as a matter of fact, I'm going to borrow from Jackson Potter. He is also a founding member of CORE, our Caucus of rank and file educators, who recently wrote an article about the experience of CORE back in 2008, which I didn't know about, and how people like Ginny Sims from the British Columbia Teachers Federation, Maria Luz Arriaga from Mexico La Cinte, right? And Alex Caputo Pearl from the Union of Teachers in LA, had a very big impact on the direction that CORE took. Now, CORE is the caucus that is currently leading the Chicago Teachers Union with Karen Lewis and right now. And it's very important, but what I'm gonna do is stop there and kind of give a little bit about my own history to see why, to me, it's very important what you did. And how it's transformed my union in Chicago to something more democratic and a fighting union. And so, to me, that has helped me a lot in change and grow. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Chicago, and we would go to Mexico to visit our family. My mother has family in Mexico City, my father from San Luis Potosí, and we would go, and you know, years ago they were very poor, but my grandfather immigrated to the United States. He worked on the railroads and became a citizen, and he would send money back home to help the family. So today they're not poor, you know, they have their nurses, you know, they have professions. They're not rich, but they're not poor. But every time we would go visit, I noticed that there were parts of Mexico that were very poor. There was poverty. And I was, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old. And as I got a little older, I noticed the same thing in the United States, that we also had poverty. But I didn't know why at that time. And as I got older, went to college, undergraduate at UIC, you start learning things, right? And there was a lot going on in the 80s. And you meet different groups. I met a left group, and you really start learning where wars start and why there are very rich people and very poor people. At that time also, there was the revolutionary movements in Central America and the United States' involvement with the counter-revolution, the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the first intifada in Palestine. So there was a lot going on, and I got very involved, but I also got very angry that my government was involved in a lot of things that I didn't know they were involved in. But as years go by, finished getting my degree, now I'm working in the public education sector, right? And lo and behold, we have these same problems now. You know, what's been happening is we're going back in time. You know, private sector unions are being dismantled. They're losing their pensions, okay? Instead of going forward in progress, we're like kind of going backward in time. We had a time of upheaval 100 years ago, formation of public education, unions, middle class. You had, like the professor was saying, at the universities, you had all these different programs, you know, that were talking about issues that had been talked about. But now we're going back in time, right? And then kind of wondering what's happening in education. Well, you know, the founding of public education in the United States was a fantastic, great accomplishment. You know, privilege and wealth is what got you an education. But now everybody, regardless of your race, although there were problems, you know, your ethnicity, you know, what you earned, you got a public education. teachers started to unionize. Teachers started to fight for their kids' education, for funding, right? And teacher salaries got better, right? And things got better. But something was happening now, okay? So in Chicago, we started seeing what was called reconstitution, where in very poor neighborhoods, especially in African-American communities, teachers would be fired, okay? And it decimated the African-American teaching population in Chicago. Many lost their jobs. In many of our minority communities, especially in African-American communities, there was disinvestment. So you had a lot of poverty. You didn't have job creation in there. It also impacted what was happening in the Latino community, the immigrant communities. And there we had overpopulation because they weren't building enough schools. So we had kids of 40, 50, or 60 in the classroom, classrooms on the stage, classrooms in the basement. And so they were not keeping, those responsible were not keeping up with the funding in our schools. And then they started blaming teachers, okay? So in the middle of 1995, they gave control of the schools to the mayor. A law was passed that stripped quite a bit of the CTU of its bargaining rights. Now I think we can fight for our salary and benefits. And the big blame game started. It was the teachers' problem. Teachers in these unions, you had all this rights to protect your job. You know, it was the parents' fault, the kids' fault, and teachers were being demonized. And as I'm working in public education, I'm like, why isn't anybody fighting? You know, I would go to union meetings, and it's like we should be out in the communities and reaching out to parents and organizing our students. Nothing was happening. So 2010, you know, I was a delegate at my school, and all of a sudden they're cutting budgets, right? And my school was gonna lose 9 teachers. So there was gonna be a rally, you know, and this was before CORE came to power, right? And there's gonna be a rally, so I go downtown, and I'm looking for my union leadership. So I see a group of teachers on the sidewalk, and you know, they had their homemade signs, right? So I go into the CPS headquarters. I see the president of our union, vice president, all the signs were on the floor, and they were just standing there. And I'm like, why aren't you guys out there? You should be out there rallying. And you know, so I picked up the sign, went out there, and I joined these other teachers, which I didn't know till later that those were the founding teachers of CORE. They were the ones who had organized this, and yet they were not in the leadership of the union yet. So they came out, there were thousands of teachers. I think it was like 4,000 that came out. And this was like the first time we had had anything like that in decades, literally. So you saw the beginnings of where CTU was being changed from a management business-like model to an organizational model. The union was gonna be democratized. CORE came into the leadership, and things changed. We now have an organizing department that does tremendous work. It's creating alliances with parents, community groups. Now we have even high school students. We're talking about, like, we need to get the kids activated. We have high school students. They would have, like, every Friday, like Friday you come out and they're rallying out there. And so we're now, you know, reaching out to other unions, making alliances. We see changes in our political action where we're cultivating aldermanic candidates. We're supporting candidates to support public education. We're now helping to get bills created in our state government that also support public education. Now saying we need a LaSalle Street tax, which taxes mercantile trade, a millionaire's tax, try to change the Constitution so that we can have a progressive tax system. So we're seeing a major change in our city to the point now that on April 1st, we were able to build a coalition where we joined with other unions, not only in Chicago, but in the state, parent groups, student groups, community-based organizations, even university professors that were threatened, that actually many recently lost their job because we have a crazy governor that will not pass a budget unless we give up our labor rights. And so he's holding the state hostage. So several universities, one specifically, was going to be closed down. So things have changed, and I come back to those three founding members of the Trinational Coalition had an impact on those who were starting CORE. You know, you have to organize outside the schools, inside the schools, reach out to the parents. You have to be more militant. I remember the 2012 strike, which is the first one we had in over 25 years. It had been 25 years since our last strike. We would have 10,000 members out in the street after picketing all day at our schools. And it was liberating. You would be going down the street, a sea of red, and people from the windows cheering us on, thumbs up, supporting us. We have changed the narrative in the city of Chicago. It's no longer, you're the problem. We had a mayor that used a vulgar term against teachers. The teachers gave the students the shaft, which is to us vulgar language. You know, it's not our fault. Now, a survey was done that the majority of the people in Chicago trust the CTU on decisions for education. They don't trust the school board. So the narrative has changed. The rich have to pay their fair share. The educators are the ones that care for the kids, and we're the ones fighting for public education. So what we need more, we have to find ways that we can help other people to feel that, you know. I mean, there's no way I would be standing up here like this 7 years ago speaking in front of other educators. So it's made a very big impact. So we need to do more of this, and I don't know, maybe tomorrow we can work on how we can reach out to more of our members and have an organizing type of union, a social justice union, a union that supports the movements in our community. Our officers were out in the streets with Black Lives Matter, protesting unjustified murders of African Americans by the police. I mean, you know, that's a big change. So thank you again, Trinational, and thank you for inviting us here, and me, for the first time, and thank you, everyone.